Yesterday, I watched a movie with my friend. It's called Dear You, and it is a Chinese movie mainly spoken in the Teochew dialect. This movie really made me think quite a bit because it is set in the 1940s and 50s when China was going through a civil war, and basically a lot of the people had to flee the country because, especially the men, the war meant that they were conscripted, and so a lot of people had to run away from being in the army, or they were in such poverty that they had to go out to some other country to find resources. And usually, a lot of them ended up in Southeast Asia. And it really made me think a lot because it basically described my great grandparents' generation, where they did come from China all the way to Malaysia, and all the struggles and hardships that they went through to find a new life and to provide better life for the family, because a lot of the times the wife and kids are left back in China, and the men had to come down to Southeast Asia through a month-long journey on a really cramped boat, and some even die on the boat. And yeah, by the time they came to Southeast Asia, they had to work really laborious, just tough jobs in order to make some sort of living. And yeah, I think the whole movie was really interesting because it just described this family dynamic where basically the husband and the wife never met anymore, and they're separated in these two different worlds, and the only thing connecting them is through letters. And there's a lot that happened throughout the story, and it talks about the misunderstandings that happen from these eras. And I think the reason why I really related to this, even though I've never seen my great grandparents, is because as a fourth generation Malaysian, it is really interesting to learn about your heritage and your ancestry, and how much they sacrifice in order to build this new life in this new country so that now you can thrive. And it hits even harder because I'm also a immigrant child, and my parents decided to migrate our whole family to Australia when I was young. And so even though these two migration happened at different eras, completely different periods and contexts, I think the element of struggle and the element of identity is always present. And it is really interesting to me because despite of all the struggles and the hardships that they went through in order to just survive and make sure that there's food on the table for the family, somehow they still are able to pass down their heritage, their knowledge, their language, the culture, and there's just this sense of resilience, and how they manage to build a new home, and bring a piece of their home to this new land. And that's what I just think it's amazing, and just really resilient, and of how cultures like that are passed down through generations, even though they have left their home country and maybe have never been able to go back. And so I think these days there's a lot of discussions around, I guess, how the past generations might have maybe passed on some generational trauma, or just different childhood upbringings and how it affected you. And I think there is quite a lot of negative in those discussions. But I think it is also important to understand the context. It's important to understand what context your previous generations were dealing with, and what were their priorities. Because the great grandparents' generation, they were just trying to survive. They were just trying to live and trying to make sure that everyone stays alive. And therefore, honestly, emotional connection and care might have been neglected because it's the pyramid of needs, right? Human needs is they were just trying to get food and get clothing on. Yeah, that's it. So I think it is just about understanding and being a bit more, yeah, understanding of what people were going through back then, and not necessarily, I guess, blaming them for everything that might be wrong or might not be ideal for your life, because it could have been way worse if they didn't make the sacrifices that they made. And yeah, I think a lot of it is just about being conscious of the fact that you have this privilege because the generations before you decided to make a sacrifice in a sense, and decided to basically work as hard as they can, sometimes at the expense of themselves, in order to provide a better living and a better life for their future generations. I think it's just a very human thing to want to nurture the young ones, to want to just make sure the next generation gets better and better and better. And yeah, I think this is also why I feel really strongly about understanding cultures and heritage, and just making sure that those things are not really forgotten and ignored as the generation goes on, because a lot of these stories of the past generations, I think it serves as a really important reminder to us in the present of the morals, and I guess the resilience, or just what they were fighting for, and why they fought so hard to keep a piece of themselves, to keep a piece of their culture, and in the meantime also somehow adapting to the environment they are in now, and finding a new sense of identity in that sense, because it's really difficult, especially if you imagine you're in your 30s and 40s, and you have to suddenly uproot yourself and move to a new country that you don't really know anything about, with a language that's not your first language, and you have to build a home now in this place, and basically somehow still maintain a sense of who you are, and your cultures and all the practices and heritage that was passed down from your parents or your grandparents. And yeah, that's why I think all these immigration stories are really important and interesting. And I think everyone should understand a bit more about their own culture. And yeah, I think it's just being grateful for what the previous generations sacrificed in order for you to live this life that you have, and have the privilege that you have. And yeah, this is day 27 of me talking to the camera. Bye.